The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, thinking they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Not bored, not broke, but back from a one-week vacation. It's no secret that the deadest 3 weeks of the year in sports are the first 3 weeks in July. You say, whoa, what about the All-Star game? Television rating for the All-Star game, 7.4 million. Now, that was up 6%. But that's a little more than a third that watched the women's NCAA basketball championship game. So we're out of it now as training camps are opening up. Commanders get going tomorrow with veterans reporting, and we'll have plenty to talk about with football. But that's the way it works now with the NFL totally dominating the calendar. And they give 3 weeks to everybody else. Hey, baseball, take your shot. Here you go. We're on vacation. And that's all they can produce. We do have the Olympics starting up, and there was a very good story over the weekend in the Post, which I'll go through, about what happened in 1984 and how that has basically given us 40 years of life for the Olympics. The Olympics were teetering in 84, partially because we had boycotted in 1980 in Moscow, and then the Soviets boycotted in 84, but kind of worked to our advantage. It was a real all-American celebration, and stars were born like Mary Lou Retton and Edwin Moses and Carl Lewis and people like that, and it has sustained for these 40 years. Now, where the Olympics are now, I think they've taken a hit. Countries have lost money on it. The LA Olympics in 84 made money, and that's all part of the story with Peter Ueberroth running those. But I think there's still, interest in it, obviously, and they're going to continue. But it's not the big deal that it used to be, certainly not what it was in 1984. And we'll get to that and talk about all those things. Let me start with this because I did watch a lot of it yesterday, the Hall of Fame induction speeches in Cooperstown. And there were 4 that went in this year. There were 3 players, Joe Mauer, Adrian Beltre, and Todd Helton. All of them, interesting stories. Beltre rang up a lot of numbers. I don't think he's like the household name that you have with, some of the greats of all time. But there's no denying what he accomplished as both a tremendous fielding third baseman and a tremendous hitter who accumulated more than 3,000 hits. So he got in. Joe Mauer didn't have that long of a career, but I think he's interesting in this regard. When he came out of high school, he went to school in Minneapolis, and he was, according to USA Today, the number 1 high school baseball player and the number 1 high school football player. And at that time, Florida State was a powerhouse. Florida State wanted him to play quarterback there, and the hometown Twins drafted him, and so he had the option of going to college to play football. And I would think, because Bobby Bowden used to allow this, he allowed Deion Sanders to do it. If he wanted to play baseball, he could have done that too. But I think the allure of playing for his hometown team meant something to him, and he wound up having a terrific career with the Minnesota Twins. But I wonder about this, too. The multi-sport athlete, it's kind of disappeared. And, Mauer didn't come out of high school that long ago. It was, I think, 2001, relatively speaking. And at that time, it was possible, to have multi-sport athletes, and he chose to go baseball. But the fact that he was a star in both sports in high school probably doesn't happen today. You get identified as a prospect when you're like 10, 12 years old, no matter what the sport is, and that's what you concentrate on. If you're a basketball player, you don't play anything else. If you're a swimmer, that's what you do, and it leads to burnout, and it leads to, I think, more injuries because of overuse of muscles. So, this was kind of a throwback, and it was a really nice story. He had his family there, and, he's still a young guy. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer, so he's probably in his early 40s now. And so we have all that to look on now and look back at when he came out of high school and say, could that happen again? Could you have a guy who was a big star to be the number 1 high school football player in America and the number 1 high school baseball player? And Todd Helton, that's another multi-sport guy. People forget this, but the starting quarterback at Tennessee in the opening game when Peyton Manning was a freshman was Todd Helton. Todd Helton was a backup quarterback at Tennessee in 1993 and 1994. Didn't play that much. In fact, he hardly played in 93 when he threw for just 78 yards. He did throw a couple of touchdowns. And then in 94, he threw for 400 yards and 2 touchdowns and 3 interceptions, but it was pretty clear that Peyton Manning was going to be the star, and he switched to baseball. He had a Hall of Fame career. Heath Schuler, as big a bust as he was in the NFL, he was the number 3 overall pick. And, of course, Peyton Manning in 1998 was the number one pick, and he's in the Hall of Fame. And now Todd Helton is in the Hall of Fame for his career with the Colorado Rockies. Never won a World Series, but one of the great hitting first basemen of his era. And he's in as a first ballot guy or pretty close to it. He gets in. And then among the speeches, they were fine. All 3 of those guys spoke well. Beltre, along with Maurer and Helton, they were good. But the best speech came from Jim Leland. And I don't know if there's a measuring for this, but on the all-time dugout smokers list, he's got to be right there with Earl Weaver. He still looks pretty good, but almost every time you saw him, he had a cigarette in his hand. And he managed for a number of teams, managed with the Pirates, got them to a high level. Remember when they finally were able to get to the playoffs in the early 90s. He won a World Series in Miami, managed in Detroit, actually managed for a brief period of time in Colorado. And he had, I think, the best speech of the day, and this was the best part of it as he thanked his family.
I would like you to meet my wife, Katie, my son, Patrick, and my lovely daughter, Kelly. Right here in the front row. And I want to thank them for the love for a husband and a father and the support for a baseball lifer. Katie, this just doesn't happen without you. I was having coffee with Katie a couple weeks after I was elected to the Hall of Fame. And I casually said, Katie, can you believe in your wildest dreams that I've been elected to the Hall of Fame? And Katie replied, Jim, you're not in my wildest dreams. From the sandlots of Perrysburg, a jewel of a town in northwest Ohio to grow up in, to a Hall of Fame stage in Cooperstown is a long journey. Shortly after high school, I signed a pro contract with the Detroit Tigers. The scout to sign me was named Herman Kander, and I think he was fired 24 hours after that transaction was announced. I bounced around the minor leagues for 7 years as a player and a player coach, but I want to sum up my playing career real quick with this quick little story. Eddie Brinkman played shortstop 15 years in the big leagues. We both managed in the Tiger organization, and we're on the White Sox coaching staff at the same time. One day I said to Brink, I looked up your career batting average and it was 224. He said, that's right. I said, heck, Brink, mine was 222. And Brink said, yeah, but mine was in Washington, Detroit, St. Louis, and New York, and yours was in Lakeland, Jamestown, and Rocky Mount. That's a big difference.
Yeah, I saw a lot of Ed Brinkman's career, and he was in a period of time when you could really be a light-hitting shortstop. Ozzie Smith is probably the greatest of the, I don't want to say light-hitting, because he had some good years and famously hit a home run in the National League Championship Series to send the Cardinals to the World Series. Go crazy, as Jack Buck said. But at that period of time when Brinkman played in the 60s and the 70s, right up the road was Mark Belanger, who was pretty much a clone. You know, both of them hit around 220, but they were outstanding fielders. It was later that the shortstop position changed. It changed in a large part because of Cal Ripken, a guy 6'4", who could hit home runs. That was a difference, and that gave you the A-Rods and the Jeters and guys like that. But, referencing Ed Brinkman brought a good feeling to my heart as I remember his career. And he finished, I believe, with the Yankees. He left here in 71. No, excuse me. He was part of the terrible Denny McLain trade to the Tigers, where they traded Brinkman and Aurelio Rodriguez, who was an excellent third baseman, and Joe Coleman, who won 20 games twice for the Tigers, for a washed-up Denny McLain. So he played there, and then I think he finished with the Yankees, but stayed in the Tigers chain as a coach, and obviously worked with Leland. So that was a nice story. And Leland's record, a little over 500, 1,769 wins, 1,728 losses. But he managed for 22 years, won Manager of the Year 3 times, won the World Series in '97 with the Marlins, and also managed the Americans to the only World Baseball Classic they ever won in 2017. And he got choked up in talking about that. With all that he did in the major leagues as a manager, it was what he did in winning the World Baseball Classic in 2017 that meant so much to him. Okay, tomorrow, the Commanders open up training camp for the veterans. The rookies are already there. They get the veterans reporting tomorrow, and I guess Wednesday they start rolling. The first exhibition game is August 10th. That'll be a noon kickoff in New York against the Jets. They only play now 3 exhibition games. Probably won't be long before it's only 2. And then we have the 18-game regular season. But that's how things lay out in the upcoming week. And Tom Lavera's got a really good look at kind of the way to look at this team this year. A lot of hype in the offseason. And I'll get to what happened last week with the team president. I've got thoughts on that, and I'll pass those along. But, remember when they hired Dan Quinn as the coach, and rather than use the word rebuild, he chose to use recalibration. Now, this was a terrible, terrible team last year. They were 4-13. Their defense, which was supposed to be good, was horrendous. And Ron Rivera got fired, as was more than likely going to happen anyway. Even if they won 8 games with new ownership coming in, and they wanted their own people, and you weren't going to have a coach-centric operation under Ron Rivera under this ownership. So he was going to go one way or another. But he made things worse by saying last season, when he was, trying to convince everybody that Sam Howell was going to be a great quarterback, he said, if they fire me at the end of the season and the next year they have 40 guys from our roster and they go on and win, well, send me my ring. Well, they cleaned out the roster. I mean, like half are gone. So the recalibrate is being done, as Tom points out here, with basically new faces. They really flushed out everything. I remember in the opening news conference when Adam Peters was introduced as the GM, David Aldridge asked him to assess the roster, and there was a pause large enough to drive a semi-wide truck through. I mean, Peters didn't know what to say, and as you saw, they were incredibly active in free agency. Not a lot of big names coming in, but veteran guys, guys who can help to change the culture a little bit, which Rivera claimed he did but never did. And the recalibration is going to take place with those guys. By the way, the dictionary definition of recalibration, as Lavero points out here, is to adjust the settings on a device that precisely measures, senses, or moves. And so, as Tom says, wiping out half the football team isn't an adjustment. It's a teardown, which is what this is. That's not to say they can't be a decent team this year, but let's call it what it is. This is a rebuild, and as Tom says, typically no one pays to watch someone put up new drywall except on HGTV. Perhaps you could sell a rebuild near its end where Washington Nationals are. That's where they are. In terms of, they should be a good team next year. But as he points out here, there's only really 2 guys left in the organization. They're both named Marty, Martin Mayhew and Marty Herney. They're still, I guess, involved in scouting, but this is clearly an operation that's run by Adam Peters, and everything that they have done seems to be in the direction of basically scraping out all the schmutz that's left over from the Dan Snyder era, and that includes Jason Wright, who I don't quite understand exactly how this is supposed to work this year. He's essentially fired and should be fired, but he's going to stay on, it says, until, I guess, either they find somebody and they can say, okay, you'll get paid through the end of the year, or if you find something else, you're free to go. So it doesn't sound like he has a hell of a lot of responsibility here. But Jason Wright, who I think had good intentions when he came here, it seemed like a good idea to bring him in with the reporting that was being done about the toxic culture in the organization. One of the first moves that Dan Snyder made was to hire a woman to be in charge of broadcasting, Julie Donaldson, who I don't know if she'll remain on the broadcast this year. I don't know if she'll be working with Bram Weinstein and London Fletcher, but she has for the last 3 years, and 4 years, I guess. Yeah, last 4 years. And that they were in a position where they had to show everybody that they were a diverse organization, and all this reporting about the sexual harassment and all the other things that were going on. There's nothing to that, and nothing to see here. Move along. And Jason Wright had an opportunity to really make a mark here. It wasn't long before it became clear he was in over his head. And one of the things that really rankled me about him was he had grown up in California. He had gone to college in Chicago, played at Northwestern, finished his NFL career, bounced around to a number of cities, none of them Washington, finished his NFL career, played about 6 or 7 years, then went to grad school at the University of Chicago. He had been working in Washington, D.C., but only for a few years. He had no understanding of the history of this team. And I know that I offered my services to him. I know that my friend Kevin Sheehan offered his services. Let us help you out. Let us help you to not make these silly mistakes that you're making, like when you put out a crest of the team championships and you put the wrong years. When you do a Sean Taylor retirement ceremony, hastily put together, by the way, because that was, I think, the week that the story of the leaked emails came out with Bruce Allen and John Gruden, and they wanted to, gloss that over. So they had Dan Snyder stand up in front of a porta potty holding up, the jersey, and the Taylor family didn't even know about it, they said, until they were contacted a few days before. I mean, just one thing after another, and they needed somebody with historical perspective. And when Wright would get up there and pound his chest about how well he was doing and how people around the league were calling him and telling him what a great job he was doing and how can they find out how he did it, he would also say things like, well, I upped our season tickets by 180%, which sounds impressive, but if you know the history, there were years and years and years where people fought over season tickets in wills and divorces, and it wasn't that many years ago where the team was falsely claiming that they had a 200,000-seat waiting list. So how are you going to up the season tickets by 180% if you have a waiting list? They didn't have a waiting list. The season ticket base must have gone down to maybe 15,000, because even with him pumping up the season tickets 180%, the place was half empty, and half those seats were filled by visitors from the other team. And then when Dan Snyder was pushed out, Jason Wright said, we couldn't give tickets away. He needed to. He's young, he's smart, he'll learn from this, he'll go on to something else. Maybe it's in the NFL. He was up for the Packers GM president job because there's mandatory retirement there. And he would have, taken over next year. He didn't get that job, but, maybe he goes to the front office of the NFL. That's possible. But here he was in over his head. And the transformation that he talked about never happened. Here's another thing. According to the story in the Post, his original front office, which featured minorities or women in more than 50% of the roles, now has almost completely turned over. So he hired a lot of people who didn't stay very long. But here's the thing that turned it for me. And this goes back 2 years ago when Carson Wentz was going to be the quarterback. Remember that, how Rivera was pushing? And, I mean, it seems like longer ago, but it was only 2 years ago that he was going to be the starting quarterback. And Scott Abraham, who does a really good job of covering sports in this town, works his butt off, goes to all the news conferences, has relationships with various players, arranged for a sit-down interview with Carson Wentz. And in the interview, he asked what were actual questions. These were questions that a real journalist would ask. He said, real talk here, Carson. It's been well documented. Philly didn't want you. Indy didn't want you. Do you think this is your last chance to prove you can be a starting quarterback in the NFL? And Wentz didn't get angry at that. He said, I don't think about all that stuff. For me, I'm playing the game I love. I have the most confidence in myself to deliver, to play at a high level, to be a part of something special with the team. That was pretty much it. There really wasn't any, and Abraham didn't really press him on this. Well, Jason Wright, who doesn't seem like it was part of his job description because he kept telling people how busy he was, didn't seem to be part of his job description to critique an interview that was done by someone who was asking real questions that fans wanted to know. And so this is what Jason Wright tweeted out after that interview aired. He said, "Thankfully, Carson demonstrated grace and class in response to the pompous, unprofessional mess. I recognize that you have made a living on childlike provocation, but it needs to be called out. Don't expect special access and good luck building rapport with the guys." Well, Scott has great rapport with the players, number one. And two, that's a personal attack. I recognize you've made a living on childlike provocation. No, he hasn't. No, he hasn't. He's been mostly positive. So that's where Jason Wright lost me. He managed to survive 2 years longer than that. But that was an unprofessional mess, what Jason Wright demonstrated there. And, you pretty much knew when new ownership took over, and they took over, I think it was like less than this week, I think, marks exactly a year. I want to say July 23rd. Sounds about right, when they were officially approved as owners. They're going to have their own guys anyway. They've run other businesses. They inherited this guy. By and large, he did at best, fair job. But, when you behave in that way and don't take advantage of the resources that are being made available to you with people like me and Kevin Sheehan offering to help you with some of the historical background on this team, which would have helped you in not making these stupid mistakes, then, you reap what you sow. And be interesting to see who comes in. As Tom points out in his column today, the two Martys are the only guys left, Martin Mayhew and Martin Mayhew and Marty Herney. Those are the only two left from the past regime. So they have successfully scraped everybody out of here. There'll be new business people running the team. There's finally a general manager. They've hired various levels of management. Like every time you turn around, they've hired somebody else to have some type of title in the front office, plus a coach who all he's going to do is coach. And that's what Ron Rivera should have been doing if you wanted him to be the coach. So keep your fingers crossed. Feels like a new era starting here, whether you want to call it a rebuild or a recalibration. It could be a year where, they win 8 games, maybe win 9, and maybe they're flirting with the playoffs. You never know. But the feel this year is better than, at least for me, than it's been in a long, long time. They had at Nats Park on Friday night for their game against the Reds, 38,000 people. I would think that a number of them showed up for the post-game concert that was given by Carly Rae Jepsen. She performed 15 songs. But the 38,000 wasn't the biggest crowd they've had at Nats Park in the last couple of weeks. That was for a game that did not involve major league teams. And we'll get to that story and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
27 years ago, Greg Madux threw a complete game. He needed only 78 pitches to do it, and he gave up 4 hits in that game as well. Mackenzie Gore over the weekend, I believe, had 49 pitches in the first inning. And even in Maddox's day, which is not that long ago, 27 years ago, they didn't obsess over pitch counts as much as they do now. So there was, nobody even looking at the pitch count that day when he threw 78 pitches. We'll get to that in an hour. This was not on my radar as I was getting ready to go on vacation a couple of weeks ago, but I did see a story that the Savannah Bananas, who are sort of the Harlem Globetrotters of baseball, were going to play a game at Nats Park while the team was on the road, and that it was a complete sellout. They had sold every ticket. And I thought, really? I mean, I'd seen features on them. I'd read about them, and it's a really remarkable thing that they have been able to put together and the popularity that they have. But I did not expect that they would sell out a major league park, but they did. That was a tough ticket to get. And people, I guess, were very, very happy with the show. Jason Cole is kind of the ringmaster of this. He shows up in a yellow tuxedo and a yellow top hat, and he has really created something that people are latching on to. And I'm not saying that Major League Baseball needs to turn into the Savannah Bananas, but they've got some fun ideas. And some of it is things that you see in minor league baseball, but some of it is very unique, and it's a unique bunch of players. They're actual baseball players from a high level who also perform stunts. And this was Cole with Dan Patrick last week, describing what you would see at a Savannah Bananas game.
You're going to see something you've never seen before on a baseball field.
Like?
Center fielder doing a backflip catch, a guy coming up to bat with a bat on fire, a pitcher on stilts, infielders doing, catching a ball between their legs, then dribbling it back and then throwing to the first baseman who then catches it between their legs, then them celebrating at home with a huge production dance number.
But are you going after entertainer first, then athlete, baseball player?
Well, all of our players have to play at a high level. So, we have numerous guys that have been in minor league baseball, professional baseball, from first round draft picks to, high prospects that have been a part of organizations. So they have to be able to play the game, but they also have to be able to entertain. And so every day these guys are working on trick plays. Every day these guys are working on new dances, new celebrations, just to keep the fan base engaged.
So more likely to hire a choreographer or a hitting coach?
Both. And we have both. We have a dance instructor, choreographer. We have a live band. Every day we're doing new dances they've never done before as well. And then we have obviously some baseball coaches that are, again, teaching banana ball. We're teaching pitchers how to throw a pitch every 3 to 4 seconds, how to strike out a guy in 9 seconds. We're teaching the game in a very different way. And so there are baseball guys that have learned to evolve to banana ball.
Okay, but take me back to when it first started.
Back 8 years ago, when we started the Savannah Bananas, my wife and I had this big dream to make baseball fun. And we came there and we started telling everyone our vision, inspired by P.T. Barnum, Walt Disney. And people looked at us like we were crazy. I mean, Dan, we only sold a handful of tickets in our first few months. And by January 2016, we overdrafted our account. We were out of money. We had to sell our house, empty out our savings account. We were sleeping on an airbed. And it was because no one had seen it. They hadn't experienced it. And so once we got enough people to come out of the first game and see, there are no ticket fees, no convenience fees, no service fees, all-inclusive food, everything that we believe in fans first, they started telling everyone. And since that first year, we've sold out every single game, and the wait list just passed over 2.7 million for tickets.
Is there a Harlem Globetrotters feel?
We get compared to that, and at first, definitely honored. I've studied them as much as, the Grateful Dead and Saturday Night Live and WWE and Cirque du Soleil. But with Harlem Globetrotters, they fundamentally changed the game of basketball in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. As Wilt Chamberlain played for them before he played for the Lakers. The Globetrotters beat the Lakers. They were playing competitive basketball at the highest level. And then it turned into, let's do this all of a show and let's replicate that. And they did a great job. Every game is competitive for us. You never know who's going to win. And we're building something what we believe is the sport of banana ball as much as the Bananas as the lead brand. So inspired by them, love what they did for basketball. We hope we can bring more fun to the game of baseball.
That's Jesse Cole, who runs the Savannah Bananas. Just for historical sake, Wilt Chamberlain played for the Globetrotters because he left Kansas early, wasn't able to go to the NBA. And when he went to the NBA, he first went to the Philadelphia Warriors, who became the Golden State Warriors, also played for the 76ers, which was the Syracuse Nationals, who had moved to Philadelphia and then played for the Lakers. But, the spirit is right. And yes, they did have they had a number of other players. I think Connie Hawkins, who was barred from playing in the NBA because he associated with a gambler, played for the Globetrotters. I think Bob Gibson, also the great pitcher, played for the Globetrotters before he concentrated on baseball full time. This was the question about the rule, and they have all these crazy rules. But Jesse Cole, who runs the Savannah Bananas, asked by Dan Patrick if there was a rule you could suggest for Major League Baseball, what would it be?
I think everyone will say if a fan catches a foul ball, it's an out because, just last week at the Nationals Park, we had 3 fans catch foul balls in big situations. And we've even had a 15-year-old kid catch a foul ball to win a game, which is unbelievable. But, you think about the 2-hour time limit, and you think about if you win an inning, you get a point. So every inning is a walk-off situation. I mean, walk-off home runs in the 5th inning. It's exciting. No stepping out of the box, no walks, no bunting, no mound visits. So everything is tried to make the game faster. And, we played a game on ESPN the other day, an hour and 29 minutes, 9 innings. So I think everyone wants the fan-caught foul ball, but I think there's other ones that could probably go into the game a little easier.
It might not be a bad idea for an All-Star game. They probably wouldn't do it, but it does make some sense. Now, you're not going to have, infielders making backflips and things like that, but just to speed it along. And to be fair, this last All-Star game last week was less than 2.5 hours. So, baseball has moved that in the right direction, that it's a faster moving game and it's easier to consume. Nobody wants to watch a 3-hour and 40-minute 9-inning baseball game. They just don't want to see it. Last thing from Jesse Cole, who again runs the Savannah Bananas. This is on the promotions that didn't necessarily work out.
Every night is a show, and we do 10 to 15 things every night we've never done in front of a live crowd. So I could go into, the living piñata, to the pregnant women dance off, to flatulence fun night, to salute to underwear night. We do things every single night that might not go well.
Wait, how does flatulence fun night?
That was very simple. We gave out whoopee cushions, had a bean burrito eating contest, had farting contests on the field. That was way back in the day. That was even before the Bananas, my first team. So, you try things, Dan. That's part of what we do.
Do you bounce this off your wife and you say, "Hey, hon, I got it"? Flatulence night.
Yes, and she usually looks at me like I'm crazy, and I'm used to that. But no, we have idea sessions every single day where we said, "Hey, what are the craziest things we can do tonight that we've never done before?" And that keeps it fun for our players and fun for our fans.
And pregnant women night too? Dancing?
What's that?
Pregnant dancing women?
Yeah, to push it by salt and pepper. So we had them dancing to push it by salt and pepper, which was great. Or we had the Cougar race where we had women in their late 40s and they had to race around first, have a drink with the players, run around second, run around third, pick up the players, put them on their backs, and run them, take them home. That was a fun one we did at Houston, our major league stadium, for the first time. But Menopops, I could keep going. We did Pass the Bill in D.C. where we actually had our teams passing people named Bill all the way down the lines. And it's a lot of creativity. A lot of things don't work, but our fans expect the ridiculousness, which is pretty cool to see.
Sounds like fun. That's Jesse Cole, runs the Savannah Bananas. I did not see him when they were in town here, but have watched some of what they do on TV and seen a bunch of features about him. In this Me Too era, I'm not sure how Cougar Night goes over, but obviously he's getting away with it. Tom Brenneman is back. Remember Tom Brenneman 4 years ago had a gay slur on the air when he was doing a Reds and Royals game, came back and apologized, and while he was apologizing, Nick Castellanos hit a home run, and he paused to note that and wondered if he'd ever have an opportunity to do baseball or do anything again, and really hasn't for the last 4 years. I think he's done some high school stuff. Well, CW, which is the network that televises Live Golf, and they've got some other things they do now inside the NFL, which Bill Belichick is going to be a part of. Brenneman has been hired by the CW to do 2 nationally televised college football games. So he's kind of back in there, and, the question is, does he deserve it? Should that have been a career ender? He's apologized for it. I didn't like the way he handled it initially, saying, I never used that word before. Please. It came out pretty easily. All of us who have done this kind of work, you got to be cautious. There are things that I say when the microphones are off that I would never want to get on the air. But when you're doing a remote situation like he is, where he's at the ballpark and the truck is someplace else, you don't really know when you're on the air or when you're off the air. So you've got to be really careful. And he wasn't. And clearly, his mind was not in the right place. And has he done enough? Has sitting out 4 years been enough? I don't know. Bob Costas, giving him a break. He was interviewed by The Athletic about this. He says neither Tom nor anyone else denies that he had a serious misstep, a misstep for which some consequence would have been appropriate, but the price he has paid is beyond disproportionate, especially when you consider that he had a fine reputation prior to the incident and took every proper step to make amends subsequent to it. His return to the booth is overdue, and I'm sure the audience will be happy to hear his voice again. You can debate that, and he has gone through counseling. He's talked to various gay and lesbian groups about, how hurtful the slur was and so forth and so on. I guess 4 years is enough. It's obviously enough for the CW. Will he get him back to being where he was? Because he was one of the top announcers. He was doing like the number 3 NFL game every week. His father, Marty Brenneman, had been the legendary voice of the Reds for many, many years. He may even be in the Hall of Fame. But it is what it is. He said what he said. It was clear as day. I've heard the tape of it. And just missing 4 years, maybe that is enough. I don't know. But I would not say that he necessarily has to get back on the air, because I think that this is a privilege, and I think he violated that privilege by saying what he said. But that's the plan. He's back on the CW for college football this year. Coming up, did John Harbaugh bend over backwards too far to talk about Lamar Jackson and what's exactly going on there? We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. Oh, the Olympics are back, starting in Paris this week. Some very good writing over the weekend about that in the Post, and I'll go through a story of how it got a rocket booster 40 years ago when Peter Ueberroth took over the Olympics, and they were held in Los Angeles, minus the Soviets, which some thought might detract from it. In a lot of ways, it made it even more attractive. We are a nation of people that like to win. And without top competition, we cleaned up in medals and we made some stars. And it was also maybe the beginning of marketing, how Olympics became a marketing machine, and what Ueberroth did to turn something that had been a big money loser into a profitable operation. Now, it hasn't been profitable since, but looking back on what happened 40 years ago, pretty incredible. And I don't remember being as much into the Olympics as I was in 84. It's a little different in 72. There was the tragedy of the Israeli athletes who were murdered, and some really questionable decisions that were made. We learned, the names of Nadia Comaneci and Mark Spitz won 7 gold medals and things like that. But 84 was really a game changer for the Olympics, and we will get to that. Our long walk in the desert is just about over. Training camps are opening up. Commanders get going fully on Wednesday, with veterans reporting tomorrow. The rookies are already there. And it pretty much, that's pretty much sports from now right through the middle of February. And it isn't long before, we're talking about the combine. And right after the combine, we're talking about the draft. And the draft is followed by, the free agency comes first, and then the draft. I mean, it's just a constant swallowing of news by the NFL. The only time they take off really are these few weeks in early July. I mean, that's it. And now we're going to be off and running. So the Ravens have already started. They got their veterans there. And yesterday they had a practice, and Lamar Jackson did show up, but was sent home because he wasn't feeling well. Doctor sent him home with an illness, and according to what John Harbaugh, the coach, said, he just started getting sick on Saturday, and it wasn't good, he said. So he tried to get in today and get the rest and fluids and things, just wasn't good. So who ran the practice yesterday? This guy is unbelievable. Every time you turn around, he's with another team, and he is still in the NFL. Josh Johnson. Josh Johnson is still playing. He's 38 years old. He's the backup quarterback to Lamar Jackson. And, he's kind of Forrest Gump. We had the NFC Championship game a couple of years ago. Brock Purdy hurts his elbow. Who comes in? Josh Jackson. We called the role of quarterbacks here remember in 2018 when you had the Alex Smith injury, and it was like 5 different quarterbacks, and finally Josh Johnson got to play. Mark Sanchez came in. He was terrible. It's just amazing that he's still in the league and still finding opportunities to play, but obviously teams like him, and he's willing to be the backup, willing to move from place to place, maybe the ultimate NFL nomad. But as far as Lamar goes, this I thought was maybe a little bit over the top. John Harbaugh wrapping up his news conference, about a 12-minute news conference, and he was asked about the criticism that Lamar Jackson has gotten over not reaching the Super Bowl. And that launched, it's not a rant, it's not really a rant, but maybe over-the-top defense for his quarterback. This, again, he's not going into a contract year. It's not like a couple years ago where they, had to make sure that they said all the right things about Lamar so he would re-sign with the Ravens. It wasn't any of that. This was just a simple question about criticism directed at Lamar, and this is what the coach, John Harbaugh, had to say.
The old saying, you guys played sports, he used to tell you don't read your press clippings, right? We don't really have press clippings anymore. We got the phones and the computers. Press clipping, at least if it was bad, you could throw it up and throw it in the trash can. Now I want to. So I do flip through them, to be honest with you. I read the stuff. I see the guys say what they say on the shows. At least I get clips of them because they come up on your phone. And the good ones I just scroll past because, that's candy, that's not real. But the bad ones, it's like you wrote, I read it right away, and don't let it go. And that's okay. That's part of the deal. And Lamar, for whatever reason, there's a lot of great things said about Lamar, but there's a lot of stuff that's said that you got to just scratch your head about and kind of wonder, what's that person even thinking, So, but we take it personally. Lamar's a guy all his life. Lamar Jackson has been a guy who's been answering those same questions. I'm talking about since he was a kid, junior high, high school, college, the draft, the success he's had in the National Football League, and it still comes up. Okay? He's still growing. He's got a growth mindset. He's going to get better and better, no doubt. But what does he have to do to prove himself to some people, right? And so the thing for me is it's talking about vision again. There's a vision. And I believe the Ravens and we've always had a vision for Lamar Jackson. It started with Lamar's vision and his mom's vision when he said he was going to be a quarterback. He was going to be a quarterback in high school. He's going to be a quarterback in college. He's going to be a quarterback in the National Football League. And we bought into that. We embraced it. We built an offense for it at 19. We're building another offense for it in 23 and 24 going forward, right? The next iteration of our offense around Lamar Jackson. Because in my opinion, the vision for Lamar Jackson, and it's a vision, it's something you see it like it's already happened. You can see it like it's already been done. The victory has already been won when you pour into a vision. And the vision that we have together is that Lamar Jackson is going to become and be known and be recognized as the greatest quarterback ever to play in the history of the National Football League. That's the vision, all right? It's going to happen by Lamar, his work ethic, and his brilliant talent, by all of us pouring into that effort together as a team, teamwork, and by the grace of God and God's goodwill. That's how it's going to happen. And I believe it like we've already seen it. Okay?
Well, here are the numbers. He's only 27 years old, and he has now won 2 NFL MVP awards, the youngest ever to do that. His record since 2018 is 58-19. That's the second best record in the league. In 2019, they went 14-2, and last year 13-4. But he's lost 4 of his 6 playoff games. And in the AFC Championship game, which they finally got to play last season in Baltimore, they lost 17-10 to the Chiefs. And he was, he had 2 turnovers, 54% completion. Just not a great night. And while he has become a great dual threat quarterback, he's run for more yards than any quarterback in his first 6 seasons, 5,200 yards, has thrown 125 touchdown passes in 77 starts. Those are stunning numbers. And those might lead you to follow along with John Harbaugh, where he says that they believe Lamar Jackson can become the greatest football player in the history of the National Football League, or the greatest quarterback is how he put it. The problem is that Tom Brady, I believe, by 27 had 3. And he doesn't have any, and he's never been to a Super Bowl. I know that's maybe unfair, and it's a team game, and you have 53 men on the roster and all that, but those are the facts. And until he wins one, I think there's going to be criticism. And when you've lost 4 of 6 playoff games that you play in, unfortunately, that's the way we measure. So was Harbaugh going too far in that? I don't know. He wants his quarterback feeling good. He knows him better than anybody. He's had him since 2018. They don't change coaches in Baltimore. He's been on the job, I think, 15 years now for Harbaugh. So I just, that was a long rant. Not a rant, but a long defense. That was 2 minutes and 39 seconds. That's a long time to be talking about the quarterback. And that's what Harbaugh did yesterday as they had practice in Owings Mills. Take it for what it's worth. Also, as part of the treat of football returning, we get the return of the Red Zone channel. And I have been a big fan of this. This is pretty typical of my Sunday watching. I'll watch the entire Commanders game. And if they're playing at 1 o'clock, then I switch over to the Red Zone channel, and I watch that for the rest of the afternoon games. And I think Scott Hanson does a really great job on this. Now, Hanson used to be at what they called Comcast Sportsnet. It's now Monumental, owned by Ted, and they don't do anything except things that are based around the hockey and the basketball teams. But back in the day, it was like a regional sports network, and they did sports newscasts. They had a full team of anchors, one of them Chick Hernandez, who's now at Channel 9, and Hanson was one of them. And I just thought he was like, okay, he's fine. I didn't think he was anything special. But he has taken to this like a duck to water, and he's tremendous in the way he gets you from game to game, and he has this unbelievable enthusiasm, which he keeps up for 7 hours. 7 hours of non-commercial NFL, or uninterrupted, however he puts it. So he was on last week on the Rich Eisen show, Tom Pelissero filling in, and they got to, after 7 hours of manic football, taking you from game to game with highlights mixed in. How does he decompress? And, what he's always asked about is, hey, how do you stay on the set for 7 hours without going to the bathroom? That's all part of this. So this was Hanson talking about how things wind down for him when he completes his 7 hours of commercial-free football.
I finished Red Zone. My bladder is famously trained enough that I don't even go to the bathroom right when I take the microphone off.
Are you drinking water? Or are you drinking coffee?
Nope.
So
I'm not a coffee
dehydrate
drinker
yourself.
at all. I dehydrate myself. I have one bottle of water, and I'll have a Diet Pepsi for a little caffeine kick. I hate coffee. Diet Pepsi, official soft drink of the National Football League.
There it is. This is why he gets the big bucks.
And that's 3 hours before showtime.
Right.
I like to be the first one in the studio. I eat sitting at the desk in NFL media headquarters, and then I cut off all liquids, all food 3 hours before. Use the facilities twice in the last hour before we start the laser show, and then it's the willpower of a ninja for the rest of the show. I don't even have to go to the bathroom. I can drive home. And by the way, I'm driving home. You know where we're located. For those who don't, NFL Media is located on the grounds of SoFi Stadium.
Literally
so
across
I'm
the
sitting
street.
in Chargers or Rams traffic 15, 16 weeks out of the 18 weeks of the regular season. So it takes me a good hour to get home. I don't even have to pee until I get back to my house. But I tell you this in terms of how I just say the bladder stuff because people are fascinated with it.
Yeah, it's what you're most famous for.
I go home. On my wall in my living room, I have a media wall that I had custom built where I have 5 televisions, a 70-inch screen flanked by 50-inch screens. And I turn all 5 of them on, and I'm just so accustomed to the constant stimulation.
Well, that's exactly what I thought it would be like.
I don't wind down. I put Sunday Night Football on in the big screen. I put NFL Network to watch all the highlights to do a mental checklist. Yeah, we showed that on Red Zone. We showed that on Red Zone. We showed that on Red Zone. I'll put, if ESPN has a highlight show on, I'll put that on. And then for kicks, I'll put on a news program, and then I'll put on a Marvel movie or a Star Wars movie that I've already seen before that I don't need the audio for, and I can have all that stimulation, and it's not an issue. In fact, it's kind of a comfort zone.
So that's Scott Hanson with the wind down routine from doing Red Zone. By the way, they've changed it now. Maybe they had this as well last year. Andrew Siciliano used to do it for DirecTV, and now they've merged it all into one. I believe I'm still going to get it. I still have cable TV. I know a lot of people don't, but I think maybe it's part of your YouTube package. If not, however it works, Hanson is going to do it. He's also, and Andrew's going to be a part of this as well, he's going to do a Red Zone type of broadcast for the Olympics, which are starting this week. So they're going to take you from event to event to event, which is, another level of, you don't have to sit through, while they wait around at various track events or whatever. So that's going to be interesting. That's on the Peacock channel. I guess you have to have that as well, another streaming service. One other thing from the conversation with Scott Hanson, was the story he told about Tom Brady and how he has, and Hanson believes this, that we will have maybe not Brady, but a Brady-level quarterback playing in the Olympics when they go to flag football in 4 years. Now, Brady's going to be about 50 at that time, but Hanson believes he can do it, and this is his Tom Brady story.
2 years in a row. Tom, by the way, big NFL Red Zone fan, even when he was playing. And I'm not just saying that because I'm sitting here, but he used to tell me he loved the bye week. He loved playing on Thursday Night Football so he could watch Red Zone all throughout his Sunday. So a couple years in a row, I played in Tom Brady's charity flag football game. Okay. And it's Brady. This is back in the New England Patriot days, and it's back like 10, 12 years ago. All kinds of celebrity. We had who is from The Shield, the actor Michael Chiklis, who I think has been on the show.
Big Boston fan.
Yeah, big Boston fan. He played in it, and then you had like Carl Lewis showed up to it. Then you had Scott Hanson running around, and then you had Julian Edelman, a young wide receiver. Julian Edelman, before many people knew his name, would come out and he would play in it. And then you had guys that were big money guys that donated to Best Buddies was the charity that benefited, which is an amazing organization. Google Best Buddies when you get a chance. That donated. These guys were weekend warriors, 30, 40 pounds, on the bad side of their high school football glory days. Brady warms up with everyone. He was quarterback for both teams. He warms up with everyone. He hit everyone on stride, was able to calculate, that's Julian Edelman going on a 9 route, an actual NFL wide receiver, and I can hit him. He's running a 4.4 up the seam. Yeah. And, there's Scott Hanson running a 10-yard dig, and he used to be sub-5, but he ain't now with his 40-yard dash. And then this dude who is, works at Fidelity Investments that donated $50,000 to be on the team to catch a pass from who's kind of oompa-looping around. He hit everyone on stride. He calculated, here's my personnel, and it was one of the most remarkable things to see at field level and then on the field as well. And I'll admit it because he'll bust my chops next time I see him. I dropped the first pass he ever threw to me, and it was the most gorgeous pass. And I played wide receiver at Syracuse at the end of my time. I was mesmerized. He threw from me to you, and I was like, this is the most beautiful pass I've ever right through my hands. It was right here.
What did he say?
I was going this way. The next year I played in it, and he goes, "You're not going to drop any more passes, are you?" He remembered.
That's the great ones. Michael Jordan, Tom Brady, they don't forget, and even about a flag football game. So that's the Hanson story. And again, I admire his work with the NFL. I don't have the Peacock channel, so I won't be watching him with the Olympics, but that's what he's about to embark on later this week. Coming up, it was 27 years ago today that Greg Madux completed a game, all 9 innings, throwing 78 pitches. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Tony's coming up at 11 o'clock. Before we get to Greg Madux, and this is the 27th anniversary of a 78-pitch complete game, I wanted to mention the passing of Bob Newhart. I know this was last week, and I'm sure a lot of people you heard talk about Bob Newhart last week, but for me, it's really significant. I really didn't watch the second show that he did called Newhart. For the Bob Newhart show is really the show for me, but the show that he did in the 80s and into the 90s, just called Newhart, which had, I think, the greatest ending in the history of television. I don't think there's any question about that. In the last show, he gets hit on the head with a golf ball and gets knocked out, and he wakes up in bed in his old Chicago apartment with Suzanne Plachette, who was his wife, and he says, I had a hell of a dream here. I was working at an inn and, on and on and on. And she says, oh, Bob, she had that gravelly voice, Bob, you've got to stop eating chili before you go to bed. I mean, it was just a great ending. But the Bob Newhart show, which was so popular in the 1970s and was part of a Murderer's Row lineup of shows, which included All in the Family, MASH was in there for a while, the Mary Tyler Moore Show, the Bob Newhart Show, and the Carol Burnett Show. And it came at a time in my early teens when I was babysitting almost every Saturday night. My parents went out. They went to other couples' houses for dinner, or they, go to a movie or go out to dinner. And so I babysat and I watched those shows. And, I was learning about the changing of the culture through those shows. All in the Family was groundbreaking because of the satire that Norman Lear had put together with Archie Bunker, the bigot, and how people looked at the world. And I that was something I wasn't familiar with. They lived in Queens. I'd grown up in the suburbs, Chevy Chase, D.C. It was something that blue collar. My father was I guess considered to be white collar. Most of the people I knew, their parents did that. I didn't have any understanding of that, and I didn't really understand the whole thing about bigotry, which was not that I didn't know it existed, but just the way that it was put to satire with that. And unfortunately, some of the things that Archie Bunker says are now being said by a man who's running for president again. But other than that, there were just things that I learned. And through the Mary Tyler Moore Show, that was something else I wasn't familiar with. You assume that all young women wanted to get married. Mary was not ruling it out, but she was interested in her career. This was something new. This was something that people didn't necessarily do at that time. A single woman who wasn't always trying to look for a man and was working in a male-dominated world of television. That was different. And then the Bob Newhart Show was something else different in that these were two successful people. I never got my head around an apartment. I always thought that people couldn't afford houses, lived in apartments. I didn't realize, that in downtown Chicago what it cost to live in an apartment like the Hartleys lived in. But here was a couple that didn't have kids, didn't seem interested in having kids. She had a job. She worked in a school, and he worked as a psychiatrist. And they seemed to have a very stable and marriage that, wasn't always looked at in a way that traditional marriages had looked for in TV, that you had the kids and you were always, the Leave It to Beaver, the Ozzie and Harriet shows. So this was all, all part of a learning experience for me, watching these shows as I was babysitting for my younger sisters all those years in the 1970s. But Newhart was really a groundbreaking person. He influenced a lot of comedians, including Jerry Seinfeld. He worked clean. He was a guy who, had grown up in a upper middle class family in Chicago, had worked as an accountant, and did a comedy album just sort of like on a whim. Like, he was invited to do a comedy show at a nightclub in Houston, and that's where they recorded the album. These albums, you probably wouldn't remember this unless you're really older like this, but they were really popular at the time. We had the Red Fox album, which they did blue. Bill Cosby, who did Clean, he was very popular. And Bob Newhart, who did the Button Down Mine, which sold more than 100 million copies. His best-selling record helped him become one of the first comedians to develop a following on college campuses as well. And that album, which sold so many copies, made Newhart the only comedian to win Grammy Awards for Best New Artist and Album of the Year. So that launched him, and it launched him into television. And the Bob Newhart Show, which ran on CBS from 1972 to 1978. And, it really was part of this Murderers Row lineup where you didn't need a remote control because you weren't changing the channel. All the shows that were on were just great. And he was the one who decided that this would be a couple without children, and they would give you a different side of life, which you didn't really understand, especially in an area that I grew up in. The most amazing thing about the obit for me, and he lived to be 94 years old, and all the television that he did, he won one Emmy, and that was for a guest appearance as Professor Proton on The Big Bang Theory. just amazing. Had a very normal home life, was married to the same woman for 60 years, 4 children. He just came across as this everyman guy, and he had this kind of natural stutter, which really worked well with the way he did comedy and his timing. And rest in peace, Bob Newhart. Just a very big part of my life growing up. Greg Madux on this day, July 22nd, 1997. Game 1 of a day-night doubleheader, playing the Cubs, a team that he played for. He pitched the most economical complete game in the majors in 7 years. I thought this was a record. It wasn't. Bob Tewksbury had a 76-pitch complete game for the Cardinals in August of 1990. So this is now almost 7 years later. And here's Greg Maddox. But of the 78 pitches, 15 were balls. Factored in over the 31 batters he faced, because he gave up 4 hits, almost half of them never took a pitch out of the strike zone. The average at bat lasted 2.52 pitches. You know, when you see a guy standing there and foul off like 10 pitches, no, they weren't doing that. They were swinging and grounding out or flying out. He was just getting them out. Maddox allowed 4 hits, never 2 in an inning, stranding 2 runners at second. The second runner, Mark Grace, doubled with 2 outs in the ninth, bringing Sammy Sosa to the plate. And this is how that 78-pitch complete game ended.
That should do it. Ground ball to Lemke. He's got it. Greg Maddox has won his 14th game of the year. He did it with 78 pitches, and only 15 of them missed the strike zone. 1 hit, no runs, no errors, 1 left. And folks, you just saw a great pitching performance.
No question. Maddox finished the year 19-4 with a 2.20 ERA. This, by the way, was his 6th complete game of the year. And he had 33 starts, but did not win the Cy Young. Pedro Martinez had 13 complete games, 17-8 with a far worse team with the Expos, a 1.90 ERA and 31 starts. We just don't have that anymore. We just don't have pitching like that. And when you have pretty decent pitching, it always seems to get hurt. If you missed this last week, Josiah Gray's out for the year, probably going to need Tommy John surgery. And you look around baseball, you know, the Orioles are obviously going to have to make some trades for starting pitching because they got guys on the shelf for the rest of the year. And it's just remarkable. It seems, you know, to me, relatively recently, 1997, you had that kind of pitching, and that's how pitching is supposed to work. Now we just have throwing. That was pitching, and 78 pitches completed a game for Greg Maddox on this day in 1997. All right, Tony's coming up next. I'll see you back here tomorrow at 9 a.m.